After this cutting step, please decide whether you want to have colorful petals or white petals. If you choose to have colorful petals, you will begin painting after the cutting step. If you choose white, you will just leave it as it is. If you are painting, remember the side that has your name on it is the back side, so paint the front side. To get your flower loom ready to weave, start by taping a short tail of yarn to the back of your flower plate. Bring the long end all the way across, and then start by going around the next petal. As you bring the yarn back to the front, bring it back across the flower, making an X, and go around that petal back to the front. Again, go across the flower and around the petal. Go across the flower and around the petal. And keep going until each spot is filled. Now in this case, you see I have filled the last spot on one side, but across from my yarn there's still an empty spot. If this happens, what you could do is bring your yarn all the way across the back to that empty spot and then bring it into the middle. So here I'm going to use the long end of my yarn. I might cut it a little shorter, and I want to cinch all of the yarn strings together in the middle. So I'm finding the triangle space that's directly across from my yarn right now that I'm holding. Follow my finger right there is that triangle space. I'm going to pinch it and put the end of my yarn through that triangle gap. And as I pull and cinch it together, it pulls the strings tight. All right, let's look at this process one more time. Getting the yarn taped to the back of your flower, bringing the long end across the front and around your first petal. Then back to the front, go across your flower, making an X. It's important to crisscross. And then go around the next flower, the petal. Crisscross, go back across the front of your flower and around the petal until all the spots are filled. This time you can see that our yarn and our flower petal spots lined up differently. In this case, you simply have to bring the last length into the middle. You want to cinch those pieces together, so I'm looking at the space directly across from my string, pinching it, and I'm going to loop the end of my yarn over and through that gap, pinching it, finding the end of my long piece, putting it around and pulling it back through, pulling gently to cinch those pieces together. Try to get it as centered as you can. Now you can start weaving using this length of yarn that you already have. The weaving process is simply under, over in a circular direction. So bring your yarn under and then skip over. Bring it under and skip over. After you go under, over a few times, take a break and gently pull the yarn. You'll start to see the yarn curl in a snail shell direction. You'll see it start to spiral around the middle of your loom. You want to make sure that you look closely at where you left off and continue going under, over, stopping to pull frequently to see your circle weaving start to take shape. When you decide it's time to switch colors, cut the yarn that you're weaving a little bit shorter, and you're simply going to tie the next color onto that shorter tail, just like tying your shoes. Crisscross and do a double knot. You can always have longer tails to make it easier to tie and cut the tails later. Now you have a new color. Simply continue to weave just as you were doing before. Notice that as you're weaving, each layer of your weaving alternates under, over. You even have the option of threading a few beads into this weaving if you would like. As your weaving gets larger and larger, it might get more difficult to get your fingers under and over. If that is the case, you may use a safety needle to complete your weaving.